Those are the ones off the top of my head that make a lot of sense. Sorry, that don't make a lot of sense. I should say those are the ones that come to mind when you say things that when we say things. Oh, the other one's probably hard length, but I'll leave that for another day. And not hard length, heavy ball. Heavy ball is a really interesting one. Bloody Bugger says, in the past, we've had many batters who could bowl part-time spin. Do you know any examples in the history of specialist fast bowlers who could bowl part-time spin? The closest I know is Sobers, but his primary skill wasn't fast bowling. He was a frontline opening bowler. I'm not sure his primary skill. He was just because he was better at batting. But yes, so what you're talking about is mixture bowlers. I'm not sure if it's not a name that we use a lot in cricket, but if you go through the database, that's kind of what we call it. And I'm not sure when that term came about, probably before World War II, because before then, a lot of people were mixture bowlers. And, you had someone like Barnes who people still argue whether he was a spinner or a quick. He said he was a spinner and other people said he was a quick. He certainly put a lot of revolutions on the ball. We know from reading Fred Spofforth's book. I say I've read Fred Spofforth's book. Very few other people in the history of mankind have probably read Fred Spofforth's book. But it's really interesting, by the way. He talks about baseball and cricket. Anyway. Yeah, so we know that in those days there was a lot of mixture bowlers, and there are, even if you look at Cricinfo now, there are a lot of bowlers who are said to be seamers, but when you read the match reports, they talk about their spin, and I'm talking about up until 1920s. Really, it's really from after mid 1920s that you become a spinner or a seam bowler, and so that's the big change. So if you're looking at people who are both. Let me try. This won't be an exhaustive list because there's a lot, but Sobers played at the same time that Carson Ghavri played in India. So there's two. You have Tony Gregg was another one. Ian Botham took a 5-wicket haul bowling off spin. I wouldn't say he was a real mixture bowler, but he could bowl that. Obviously, Colin Miller is probably the most famous modern day example. You get them in first class cricket at times. I want to say Wag. Graham Wagg, I think his name was, who played for a very good bowler for Glamorgan, would bowl seam and then would bowl spin. One of the famous ones, and it's funny, we're going to talk about slow balls again, because of course we are, because it's me, but the man who invented the off-cutting slow ball, so bowlers had always used the off-cutter, to vary their pace, but they bowled it in a slightly different way. But Franklin Stevenson, the West Indian, he was playing as a professional in England, and as many professional bowlers found out when they were playing, in England, that they were asked to bowl an obscene amount of overs. And so he would turn to, pardon the pun, off spin. And when he would turn to off spin, he started to realize that he could probably bowl the basic technique of off spin, but at full pace. And that's where the slow ball comes from. The off-cutting slow ball comes from. So he was another one who could do it. Trying to think. Obviously, there's a few all-rounders who have done it over the years. Australia had two back-to-back. They had Mark Waugh and Andrew Simons, who both bowled off spin and pace. As you said, those are not specialists in for their bowling, but they were certainly two that did it. There are stories of bowlers doing it on occasions for different reasons. Injuries, everything else. I'm trying to think if there's any other. It's a really, really interesting list of when you look at the mixture bowlers, and also what we don't know is what percentage any of these people bowled when it comes to what discipline that they used. So we're a little bit confused in that, but I just want to see if I see if Cricinfo still has mixture bowlers here. Oh, they do, mixture and unknown. So we said Sobers. I think Ghavri's down as a spinner. Oh, Bill Johnston was another one. It's got Maurice Tate here. I see he was one that didn't come to mind. Monty Noble is one of those early ones where it's a bit either way. Colin Miller's obviously quite high up here. Frank Worrell bowled spin sometimes as well. They've got Mark Waugh on the list. Reggie Swartz, one of the South African leg spinners, is another one who could sometimes bowl seam up. So you can see that there's a few of them out there. But what you're asking is how many of those are frontline seamers? There probably aren't as many John Reed's another good one from New Zealand. So Colin Miller is probably one of the weirder ones that I suppose for a very long time in his career was a frontline seam bowler and then came to spin later on. And I would say Tony Gregg's another one. I think in modern cricket, Tony Gregg would probably bowl a lot more of, especially he would have played, even more in Asia and maybe in T20 conditions. I think Tony Gregg was a legitimate threat with off spin or seam, and obviously Colin Miller the same. In fact, at test level, Colin Miller was probably a better off spinner, whereas for the majority of his career, he was a seam bowler. So it's a really interesting question. When you see bowlers in the nets, Jofra Archer and Jimmy Anderson, I've both seen them bowl really good spin, like proper Joe Root level spin in the nets. And so it does seem to be something that has gone away, but certainly before World War II, it was a lot more common.